Hello there, and welcome to a video about all my favorite and least favorite animated television released in 2024. A few things before we get into it.
1. This video will include both anime and Western animation in its rankings, because both of these countries are equally capable of producing incredible stories in this medium.
If you think otherwise, then I am so sorry for your loss.
2. A few of these seasons actually released their first episodes back in 2023, but I'm still going to include them all except for the Ghost and Molly McGee Season 2. Literally only the final 2 of its 21 episodes were released in 2024, so I think it would be kinda strange to rank it up against all these far more distinctly 2024 shows. It was a great season though, the series finale episode was perfect. Also, I really wanted to include Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur Season 2 because that series was easily one of my favorite discoveries of the year, but as of me recording this right now, the second half of it has yet to release, so I'm just gonna save that season for next year's video.
3. Why am I not including all the live action shows I watched? Simple, it's not my special interest and thus I didn't watch very many. I will briefly go over them here as a sort of honorable mention section though.
The live-action Netflix adaptations of both Avatar: The Last Airbender and A Good Girl's Guide to Murder were deeply flawed and significantly inferior to their source material, but I still had a mostly good time watching them. Star Wars: The Acolyte had really poor pacing and some iffy acting here and there, but still a decent story at its core and by far the best live-action lightsaber duels since the prequels. Star Wars: Skeleton Crew was just really surprisingly good, no caveats. Genuinely the best live-action Star Wars show other than Andor and early Mandalorian. Shogun is undeniably a masterpiece and an insanely impressive feat of filmmaking on all fronts, but I feel like I'll need to rewatch it in order to truly appreciate what it was going for. The finale made me realize that I was kind of engaging with the story incorrectly, and I definitely intend to go back through it at some point with a more proper mindset. My favorite live-action series of the year was easily Fallout though. I have never interacted with the game series in any capacity, but I loved pretty much everything about this series. Cannot wait for more. But now let's get into the animations.
Also just general spoiler warning for everything here.
But seriously, watch out for fire. Fire bad.
The Fire Hunter is the worst anime I've ever seen, but that honestly doesn't mean a whole lot coming from me.
I've gotten really good at avoiding bad anime. I know there are absolutely worse anime that exist out there, but why the hell would I watch Rent a Girlfriend if I don't have to? The only reason I watched this show is because of its incredibly unique concept and the fact that its first 8 or so episodes were decent enough. This anime tells the story of a world where some great cataclysm hundreds of years ago left humanity unable to use fire anymore. Contact with so much as a spark will combust you almost instantly. And even though the cataclysm also left behind these new monsters whose blood can kind of be used like fire, humanity still struggles to regain its modernity.
That's an incredibly cool sci-fi fantasy concept if you ask me, and the show does develop upon its world in some interesting ways. The problem is the execution.
I like that the show is going for unique art style, but the actual motion of the animation was really bad, all the inclusions of CGI were really bad, and they have a hard time keeping these characters on model. The dialogue has no personality, the pacing of individual scenes and the overall story are both very poor. These characters have almost no depth or anything even resembling arcs, and even the world building eventually starts to go off the rails with way too many factions and so much poorly conveyed detail. This plot is such a hot mess. It's not all bad. There are still plenty of unique concepts to appreciate. The camaraderie between Akira and Moroku was actually quite likable. Morshu is here to read us the entire Bible, and the voice acting is consistently great, even including my personal favorite voice actress Sayori Hayami as Kira.
Maybe. Damn it. He's using this microtransaction to see if I'm Kira.
No, not that one, this one. But yeah, this thing really does not come together in the end. I feel a little bad ragging on it because of how clearly limited the budget was, but those constraints feel so blatantly obvious that I wonder if the anime was even worth making in the first place. Monsters at Work.
Even though it was only the second season that came out in 2024, this is essentially going to be a review of the whole show because I feel pretty much the same about both seasons. And that feeling can be summed up with a very unenthusiastic, it's fine.
Positives first. Much like the last show, I do love the world building here. This series develops upon all the concepts from the films in a very compelling and natural way, while also adding in several interesting concepts of its own. Another positive, Mike and Sully are still great whenever they get actual screen time. Billy Crystal and John Goodman definitely aren't phoning it in, and all the funniest scenes in the show belong to them. The show also doesn't look too bad. I mean, it's clearly not movie quality, but it's always a cut above feeling genuinely cheap. My problems start to arise when talking about the show's new characters. I suppose Val and Cutter are both pretty likable, and these recurring news reporters from season 2 were super funny, but I'm largely indifferent to everyone else. Duncan and Fritz are both so extremely one-note and frequently veer into being actively annoying. Roger is only here to be another Frisk. Ugh. Roger is only here to be another Fritz and give season 2 a forced plot twist, but most unfortunately of all, Tyler Tuskman.
What a boring as sin protagonist.
I guess his main character trait is that he's kind of neurotic, but they don't even present it in an emotionally compelling way. He's just got nothing of interest going on, and I find him very hard to root for. My biggest problem with season 2 specifically was definitely its reintroduction of Johnny Worthington from Monsters University. At first, he seems pretty refreshingly subversive. Egotistical jock asshole, now runs a legitimate business, has a happy family with that formerly emo chick, behaves very amicably with his once rivals, and even serves as a legitimately good mentor to our protagonist.
These are all such interesting places to take this previously one-dimensional character. Psych!
He was just manipulating Tyler. He's gonna take down Monsters Inc. by literally stealing from them, his happy family doesn't know him at all, and he was even conspiring with wanted criminal Randall Boggs. In short, the most boring place you could possibly have taken his character. I do like the inclusion of Randall though. He's just an asshole and he has fun doing it, his motivations make sense. Overall, I'd really only recommend this show to people who are hardcore fans of the franchise. It expands upon the world very well and does do justice to our OG trio, but it has very little depth to offer beyond that. I definitely wouldn't call it bad, but I definitely can't call it anything more than okay.
I am a god, you dull creature, and I will not be bullied by that.
Twilight of the Gods is what I suppose I'd call the single most disappointing show of the year because, I mean, look at this. A story about seeking revenge against Thor Odinson for having senselessly killed your entire clan with animation that looks this amazing?
Don't you just want this to be the coolest thing ever?
The animators are certainly trying their damnedest to make it so. The composer and voice actors as well. Everything about the audiovisual presentation of this show is truly top-notch, which makes the severe lack of depth in its story and characters all the more frustrating. The first episode is pretty great at setting everything up and making us genuinely invested in Sigurd's revenge, but following this genuinely effective pilot, the show then very hastily introduces the rest of its mostly superfluous cast, throws in so many additional elements about the world and its power dynamics that it becomes super hard to keep track of, and it all just becomes a continuous cycle of adding complexity without adding depth and giving payoffs without compelling setup, and by the end, I just didn't care that much anymore. The show rarely elaborates or ruminates on the motivations of any of these people in any interesting way. It's to the point where I routinely forgot what their motives or names even were, and when half of them started dying in the last 2 episodes, I was so completely unfazed because they never bothered to give genuine depth to these relationships. The show frequently treats gratuitous sex as if it were an equivalent substitute for writing meaningful character dynamics. So yeah, how was I ever going to care when they died or cried for each other? There's almost nothing between them but awkward sex scenes. It's hardly surprising that the only death which made me feel anything was the one where they focused on a platonic dynamic. To be clear, this show definitely isn't bad. We still have those awesome action scenes all throughout, some genuinely interesting lore pieces whenever you can actually follow it, as well as 2 specific characters I mostly quite liked. Our protagonist Sigrid remains mostly compelling here, even if the story surrounding her is a total mess, and the highlight of the series by far was its interpretation of Loki. They introduced some genuinely well-developed sympathetic aspects to him, like the lengths he will go to in order to protect his family or how humanity unfairly uses him as a scapegoat god, all while still making him someone who definitely enjoys murder and has ruined the lives of many mortals. I really liked how he was handled. The overarching problem with Twilight of the Gods really does just boil down to exactly what I said earlier, adding complexity without adding depth, giving us so many different things without also providing reasons as to why we should actually care about those things.
It's shallow and it's overstuffed, and it's not like you can't tell an amazing adult animated story in only 8 episodes.
For example, I watched Amazon's Undone for the first time this year. That's an adult series with 8 episode seasons and some really high concept stuff, but where that show got me to cry in its second episode, this show couldn't get me to care whilst half its characters perished in the finale. Undone is a much more personal story, to be fair, but that just goes to show how a story of this huge scale needs much more time if it wants to be effectively told. This series either needed more episodes or it needed to rein back on its ambition a bit. It really just needed a different creative approach altogether.
Seriously, how did so many talented animators and actors get roped into working on such a flawed script? Oh.
A man has fallen for a man in Lego City.
Lego Star Wars Rebuild the Galaxy. This was just a nice little bit of simple fun, and I really only have a few things to actually say about it. The cornerstone is genuinely a very cool lore concept that I almost wish was actually canon.
I'll be using it in my unrelated Star Wars DDLC fanfic regardless.
All the alternate takes on classic characters were very fun here. Highlights include freeloader Luke Skywalker, which they actually brought on Mark Hamill to voice, Jedi Master Palpatine, Darth Jar Jar, of course, sassy gay Maul, the Landalorian, simply for how perfectly dumb of a pun that is, as well as rogue, morally ambiguous 3PO. They really have a lot of fun shuffling around the universe through this concept. Also, it's pretty wild that, to my knowledge, this show marks the first reappearance of the Narkina prison uniforms from Andor.
Like, it's so funny to me that the first time we ever saw these uniforms was in this context.
If we can fight half as hard as we've been working, we will be home in no time.
And now the first time we're seeing them again is in this context.
A trap it is! Turn it off me!
This party's just getting started.
Also, the main droid is voiced by Pym's smiling friend, so that's pretty rad.
I don't believe it! I love kids, Charlie! I love kids! Sounds like our little demon is becoming a demon!
Demon Slayer frustrates me because I feel like it's only losing depth as it progresses. Season 1 was pretty great through and through, and Mugen Train makes for a very engaging turning point. Entertainment District was super fun, but not a particularly impactful story. Swordsmith Village was less fun, and its only significant status quo change was a total ex machina.
And now we have Season 4, the Hashira training arc, the show's weakest link so far, by far.
As always, the show is great at giving depth to whatever Hashira it's chosen to focus on, namely Giyu and Gyome here, but that comes at the expense of Tanjiro, who hasn't meaningfully developed since the train.
Sure, he's grown stronger, but I don't really consider that character development.
I mean, he's still a hell of a lot better than Tyler Tuskman, but he's become a progressively less interesting protagonist for the series. Pair that with a totally arbitrary sense of pacing and the return of the worst character in all of fiction, and yeah, you've got a pretty lackluster season. There are saving graces though. Like I said, the show is still really good at making me care about the Hashira. The insights they gave us into the pasts of Giyu and especially Gyome were easily the most emotionally compelling parts of the season. My favorite character in the show also came back after a season's absence, which was a delight to witness, and it's pretty hard to deny how absolutely enthralling that season finale was. It's a very exciting setup for the final arc, and the fight choreography was just as stunning as always.
But at the same time, this finale doesn't feel particularly earned.
Like, it's awesome in a vacuum, but there was almost no natural build up to it whatsoever. We get 7 straight episodes of generic training stuff that never rises above being mildly interesting, a couple cool backstories interspersed, and then suddenly batshit insanity in the finale. Something like Entertainment District had a consistently enthralling sense of escalation leading up to its insane climax, but this season just feels extremely lopsided in that way. Also, why the hell did they think that absolutely absurd 2-minute slow motion scene of Muzan walking towards Kaguya was a good idea?
And why the hell did they show it twice?
Who do they think they're impressing with this shit? It's so dumb. I'm still excited for the final arc, but the wait definitely isn't gonna kill me. This show just ain't as good as it used to be.
I was just wondering if you wanted to hang out with me and smoke weed and fill our bellies with diet soda and play Burnout Revenge for the PS2.
I know it would be an amazing transition if that show was next, but nah, Smiling Friends is way better.
It's been 84 years.
Star Wars Tales of the Empire. I don't have a ton to say about this one, but I do like it. The low placement here is much more a result of its super short length and not necessarily its quality. The Morgan Elsbeth shorts were pretty cool and gave us a nice little corruption arc for her, and while I definitely wish her story could have been explored in much more depth and especially length, it was nice to finally get some answers about the fate of Barasafi. I've been waiting for this shit since I was 9 years old, and I'd say her redemption here works pretty well. So yeah, some decently good stories, some gorgeous Lucasfilm animation. It's a solid watch.
All my friends are heathens, take it slow.
Suicide Squad Isekai was pretty much exactly what I expected it to be.
Those expectations being not a ton of depth to the plot or characters, but still a ton of fun to be had.
This anime fantasy world they're in is deeply generic, but it still leads to tons of entertaining fish out of water scenarios, action scenes that go unsurprisingly extremely hard, and lots of fun interactions between these super likable characters. Peacemaker is as stoic as ever, Nanaue is baby girl, Deadshot is kinda dumb but in a charming way, Clayface is a pretentious twink, and Harley Quinn has a dragon. What what's not to love about these guys? Not much more to say beyond that, just a very well executed bit of cross-cultural fun. I'd totally be down for a second season. Also, I'm pretty sure this is the first proper isekai series I've ever watched. I mean, at least the first Japanese isekai.
But let's ignore all that and set aside a nice bit of time to talk about Kite Man quickly, and why he's
In Harley Quinn's second appearance on this list, we have Kite Man Hell Yeah, a new show that takes place in the same DC universe as the 2019 Harley Quinn show, and it really wasn't what I was expecting it to be. I quite like the Harley Quinn show, but I had low hopes going into this, and episode 1 was even worse than I was prepared for. Very few jokes were landing, the narrative felt so random and aimless, the new characters were all so flat, and both the pacing and editing were truly atrocious. It felt like they were cramming 3 episodes into one 22-minute slot, and it kinda sucked.
After that absolute mess of a pilot, though, the rest of the series is actually pretty solid.
I don't know what was going on with episode 1, because all the others had decent pacing, a plot that felt purposeful, a much higher hit rate with the comedy, new characters I actually liked, and even a handful of moments that were ever so slightly emotionally impactful. It's a pretty fun watch. It's still not great, though. The animation often feels pretty cheap, the subplots with Bane and Lisa's mom were pretty weirdly handled, and one thing that really bugged me is how tons of the voice actors have been downgraded since Harley Quinn. Lex Luthor is no longer Giancarlo Esposito, the Queen of Fables is no longer Wanda Sykes, and Darkseid's VA got replaced by some guy named Keith David.
Wait, that one's actually an upgrade.
Keith David is always a win. It's also kinda strange how deuteragonist Lisa is completely different here. Don't get me wrong, she's probably my favorite character in the show, but it does strike me as odd how her design, personality, and voice actress are all completely different from when we first met her in the Harley Quinn show. Either way, this is a decent series. I'd watch a second season.
Speaking of Keith David, though...
If I were to sum Hazbin Hotel up in one sentence, it would be so much cool stuff that's heavily bogged down by some truly bizarre pacing. There's a lot to appreciate about this series, but it's also the strongest example in recent memory of how not to do fast pacing. First thing to love, the characters. Charlie is a consistently likable protagonist that's super easy to root for, Vaggie is a perfect yin to her yang with a very interesting backstory, and Alistair is probably my personal favorite for being so compellingly mysterious and quietly unhinged. There's also Angel Dust, who has an absolutely harrowing arc that goes to some truly dark places, but then we have Husk, who is incredibly based for empathetically helping him through it and also for being voiced by Keith David.
Also, this series is in steep competition with the Cuphead show for having the funniest depiction of the devil in animation history.
My daughter wants to see me. Take that, depression!
Second thing to love, the music. It's not the kind of thing I personally want to listen to in my free time. Disney/Broadway style music rarely is, but every single one of these songs are perfect for their scenes and very effective at delivering plot and or character information in a mostly natural way. The standout is obviously Loser Baby because it's Keith David singing, which is literally always peak. I also like the world building quite a bit, but to get back to my main criticism, there's just not enough time to get a full sense of this take on hell. Not enough time to become truly invested in it for the climactic battle to determine the fate of its denizens. I know it probably wasn't up to the creators, but I really wish we could have gotten some quote-unquote filler stories with these genuinely engaging characters.
To use a Gravity Falls metaphor, I just wanted a few more Deep Ends or Gulf Wars and not just Gideon Rises and The Tale of Two Stands.
This goes beyond just it leaving me wanting more. It's poor pacing and it makes the story feel a whole lot less satisfying. The show is definitely still good overall and I'll absolutely be tuning in for season 2. I just hope that season is either several episodes longer or that it simply takes things slower.
Solve a mystery. Who, what, when, where, why, how?
Shoshimin, How to Become Ordinary.
It's kind of hard to talk about this show without also talking about Hyoka, at least if you're like me and have seen both series.
They're both based on books by the same guy and share the same basic concept of high school mystery solving, but where Hyoka was centered around a guy who needed to learn to love his investigative genius and embrace a more exciting life, Shoshimin is about two people who know they're super good at solving mysteries, but they're kind of annoying about it and thus ostracized, so they create a pact to help each other be as normal as possible.
And given that every single episode is centered around a mystery, it's not really working out for them.
To be clear, this series doesn't even come close to being on Hyoka's level. The absence of KyoAni will do that to you, but this is still a solid show. It's like if you metaphorically gave Hyoka a lo-fi remix. It's not as enthralling or impressive as its sister series, but it's still pretty appealing. I like how cinematic it tries to be. I mean, it's obvious that they don't have a massive budget, but the thinner aspect ratio and very distinct framing of shots give the show an undeniably unique feel. I also love how they play around with the backgrounds and putting our leads into scenarios they didn't witness. It's a style that turns these potentially boring investigative talks into very visually engaging sequences. And it's not just for the mystery discussions. In the season finale, at the height of the show's character drama, they'll show Kobato talking down an alleyway and Osanai responding from a river while they're both actually just in a coffee shop. That's cool filmmaking. I don't have any serious issues with the show, there's just a lot that kinda underwhelms me about it. For one, it's much too slow for its own good. Slow pacing can be done beautifully, but this show dragged every other episode, I'd say. Also, the characters are kinda hard to connect to. Their very understated emotions are definitely the point to some degree, but I still feel like they could have given us a lot more of who they are. Speaking of which, I think season 2 is gonna be a huge improvement. The setup they gave in the final episode here was super intriguing, and it gives me the feeling that we'll be diving much more into those characters next season. But as for season 1 specifically, it's just decent. Train to the End of the World.
I checked this show out on a whim, and what I got is easily the most conceptually bizarre anime I've ever witnessed.
It's like Infinity Train in reverse. Rather than having a massive train full of pocket dimensions where literally anything could happen, this show transforms the Earth itself into a world where anything could happen. And we just so happen to be navigating it with a train. The world building here is complete nonsense, and that's absolutely a compliment. In an attempt to upgrade the world's telecommunications from 5G to 7G, they create internet so fast that it's literally instantaneous. Which turns out to be way too fast, because as soon as they activate it, the sheer speed of the thing breaks reality and rewrites the entire fabric of the universe in a matter of seconds. It essentially puts all of existence on shuffle, and it leads to some truly bizarre things. A village where everyone becomes an animal upon turning 21, a village of mushroom hive mind people, a witch who punishes people by turning them into food, a train conductor who's only allowed to have a functioning brain 5 minutes a day, an abandoned city that loops all of your worst regrets in your head against your will. And zombies that literally explode upon hearing or witnessing anything even remotely sexual.
And there's so much more weird shit I didn't even mention, but how are the story and characters?
I'd say they're pretty alright. The plot isn't super complex, but it is very consistently engaging, and while these certainly aren't the deepest characters in the world, they're all given very distinct personalities and are undeniably fun to watch. There's a lot of great comedy between them. My only real problems with the show would be the main character's arc feeling a little contrived and the ending of the story being a little unsatisfying, but those things are nowhere near close to ruining the show. If you have a penchant for batshit insane anime, definitely give this one a watch.
Oh my god! Is that you? What the hell are you doing?
Camping.
Eurocamp Season 3. Other than the animation taking a significant hit on account of changing studios, this is still the same great Eurocamp we all know and love. If you ignore the cheaper animation, it honestly might be the best season so far. Rin and Kumiko VA made for a very pleasant pairing in that arc about exploring bridges.
I refuse to learn this character's actual name, she's just Kumiko VA.
This season finally made me give a shit about Aoi and Chiaki, whereas I was only ever truly invested in Rin and Nadeshiko previously, and those isolated fourth wall breaking episodes were completely unexpected and an absolute delight to watch. That joke about hiding in the screen wipe slays me. That's some Nokotan type shit.
We will get to her later.
It's not an amazing season or anything, Eurocamp never really is, but it still gives you everything you want to see from this show, just with slightly less beautiful backgrounds than before. This anime will always be my favorite long-form tourism ad. Smiling Friends Season 2 is everything I could have wanted from another season of this show. It's got even wackier comedy, even crazier episode concepts, and even cooler examples of mixed media animation with some really fun YouTuber cameos as well. My favorite episodes would have to be The Red Jewel on account of how fascinatingly chaotic Spamtopia was, the UFO episode for that brilliant flat earth joke at the end, and chief among all, A Alan Adventure, which was just such a masterclass in 11-minute storytelling. It was super funny, surprisingly thrilling in its action scenes, and it has what is easily one of the show's best one-off characters in Alan's landlord. It's an episode that's unironically peak fiction.
Now that he's gotten a solo episode, we desperately need one on Glep, and if it's called anything other than The Glepisode, I will literally drink water.
The
Dragon Prince actually released 2 seasons last year, but just like everything else, I will be talking about them separately. I think Season 6 was a bit better than Season 7, so here we are talking about the finale first.
It's been potentially the most divisive season in the show's history, but I actually quite liked it. A slight downgrade from how great Season 6 was, we'll get to that later, but still a decent ending to the show's second arc if you ask me. Cons first, Karim was a weirdly handled character in my opinion. After his defeat in Season 6, they set up a potentially very interesting dilemma for him as to whether he'll help the protagonists or not, but then he just makes a pathetic plea to Erebos and gets gorely smushed.
AKA the funniest fictional death of 2024, other than this.
But still not a satisfying end to his character. It's not necessarily out of character, I feel like he was at a point where they could have gone either way with him, but I definitely think it would have been more interesting if they'd gone for the mildly redemptive route instead of him being a fascist zealot to the very end. I also don't feel like the writers ever quite got the hang of Claudia and Terry. Like, they have decent enough chemistry and their actual breakup is a solid scene, but I'm still left wondering, why now? Ever since his introduction in Season 4, it's been confusing as to why this Ball of Sunshine character has been firmly aligned with the show's villains, helping them do all this awful shit. So for the actions of Claudia and Erebos this season to finally be the last straw for him feels sort of arbitrary, I guess. I feel like this could have happened earlier with equal justification. Also, something I've just noticed about this second arc of the show, the world feels so small. It's hard to really get a feel for how all the chaos going on with our core characters has a tangible effect on the people of this world. I feel like we needed some scenes of those shadow creatures terrorizing civilians or something. Making the world of the show feel affected by the main plot is something that the likes of The Last Airbender and The Clone Wars were always amazing at. But the more recent seasons of this show, and even something like my beloved She-Ra, frequently don't pay enough attention to the wide-reaching consequences of these conflicts. That's it for negatives though, there's a lot I liked about this season. For one, I think I actually like the Raylan ship again. Their build-up throughout the first 3 seasons was fantastic, but then the time skip before Season 4 split them up for some reason, and it's just been super awkward, and even when they got back together, I wasn't really feeling it anymore. But I do believe this season sort of turned things around for me. Between Callum getting along with everyone in Rayla's hometown, Rayla being willing to kill him for the sake of the plan a la Infinity War, and that cute little gift for Rayla in the final episode, it dawned on me that
Yeah, this finally works again.
Also, for as much of a comedic minefield this show has been since losing most of its funny sauce after the second season, this scene is the hardest that me and my entire family have ever laughed at this show.
How was your day?
Well, I think it went pretty... Callum wants to have 10 babies with you!
Genuine comedy gold. The emotional high of the season was definitely its handling of Runan's long-awaited return. His reunion with Athari was nice, him sort of bonding with Callum was nice, and his return causing this rift between Callum and Ezran was very well handled. The most emotional scene of the whole season is in the final episode where Runan and Ezran finally talk. I love how Ezran says that he will forgive him, he just can't quite yet. I've seen some people take issue with this, but I thought it was very compellingly done. I think it's believable. Also, Erebos has really shaped up to be a great villain for this show. His aura is as powerful as ever. I love those little moments where we can still see the little bits of humanity left in him, and he really does feel like a massive threat in those final few episodes, and not just on account of him going all... I'm also perfectly fine with his defeat being temporary here. It's satisfying enough while still leaving us wanting more. It gives our characters time to approach the problem in less dire circumstances, which were leading to some pretty extreme actions. I'm fine with it, so long as we do get that next arc.
If we don't, then yeah, what a letdown, but I'm choosing to remain hopeful for the moment.
Some other assorted thoughts before moving on. Still loving the Soren Corvus bromance.
I honestly feel like they could be more. I'd be down for it.
The dragon battle in episode 9 made for an awesome climax. Not much more to say there, just dragon battle, hell yeah. My mom kept wondering when we were going to hear Zim's first words, and to reveal it as Dante Bosco at the very end was the best possible route they could have gone. I also cannot believe they confirmed the Bird Dad fan theory from way back when. I never really bought into it when it was first proposed, but I visibly pogged at the screen upon seeing this reveal, much to the confusion of my non-fandom aware family. Very excited to see where that may go. I really do hope this series continues.
Superman.
In Amanda Waller's second appearance on this list, we have My Adventures with Superman Season 2, a season whose pros and cons were kind of directly inverse to my pros and cons with Season 1. Back then, I was mostly just watching it for the lovely romance between Clark and Lois, and then everything else about the series was just decent. Now though, the romance is given a bit too much forced melodrama, and everything else about the season goes pretty hard. The star of the show here is undoubtedly Kara. Her sincere personality that brims with curiosity and joy is so immediately likable, and it makes the oppressively cold facade she puts on because of her abusive father figure all the more saddening to watch. Seeing Kara deal with the revelation that she was used against her will in order to commit multiple genocides is so much darker than I ever would have expected this show to go, but I am all here for it. And her self-liberation from Brainiac in the finale was so insanely satisfying.
No complaints with this character. I loved everything about her.
As for some other good stuff this season, Jimmy feels much more fleshed out and genuinely involved, while also getting a wonderful little sideship with Kara. Lois's struggles with her dad continue to be compelling, the action scenes have definitely become at least a little more engaging than last season, and Brainiac was a much more engaging core threat than anyone in Season 1. A little generic, yes, but still solidly threatening. As I said before, the Lois dynamic was kinda weird here, though. Lois has anxiety about not being good enough for Clark, which is fine in isolation.
But the source of that anxiety, or at least what flares it up, is this dumbass hottest bachelor show, which... ugh.
And then when Lois actually commences the drama in earnest, the dialogue between them is just so frustratingly obtuse, and like neither of them are even remotely trying to see the perspective of the other. The ultimate resolution in the finale works well enough, but the drama throughout most of the season was such an annoying mess. In every other area though, this season is absolutely an improvement over the first. If they can just keep the Lois dynamic going strong, find another source of interpersonal drama, and keep everything else at the level it is currently, then yeah, Season 3 should be golden.
Top of the morning to you ladies, my name is Jacksepticeye and welcome to Deer Simulator.
Dear crackers for the dear God.
My pick for the best animated comedy of the year is undoubtedly My Dear Friend Nokotan. Train to the End of the World might be the most conceptually bizarre anime on this list, but Nokotan is pretty easily the most actively bizarre anime we got in 2024. And simply because it makes the series easier to write about, I'm gonna contrast it with my favorite absurdist comedy of all time. While Nichijou is easily the superior product and both shows are ultimately quite different, the sheer absurdity of Nokotan couldn't help but call to mind that KyoAni classic for me. With a few specific exceptions of pure insanity, the comedy of Nichijou is largely derived from taking scenarios relatable to ordinary life and elevating them into the absurd with vividly energetic animation and some of the most passionate voice acting in anime history, hence why that show is just as often considered a slice of life as it is an absurdist comedy. By contrast, Nokotan drops all pretense of normalcy and is just absurdity incarnate. There are scarcely any relaxing moments where the show allows itself to slow down and be genuinely heartfelt. 90% of its seemingly heartfelt moments are just setups for jokes that undercut them.
None of that is criticism, by the way. That's just what this show is, and it's so fun.
To give you a metric for just how insane this show is, the most normal character here, by far, is the girl who successfully ran a violent criminal gang at age 14.
She is the straight man of the group, and she's also voiced by the same person whose voice was sampled to create Hatsune Miku, so do with that what you will.
Our titular character, Shikonoko Nokotan, is genuinely the most chaotic person I've ever seen in an anime. Sometimes she's founding a religion with herself as the figurehead, and other times she's just chilling and eating deer crackers. Sometimes she's genuinely conspiring to commit eco-terrorism, and other times she's just enjoying getting her hair brushed. Sometimes her antlers are just getting her stuck on doorways, but other times they're bombs. Koshitan and Nokotan are an excellent comedic duo all throughout, but the show has some other pretty fun people as well. Bashame's sole character trait is loving rice, which they get a surprising amount of comedic mileage from. The bad CGI deer that inhabit every episode and consistently contribute to events are incredibly amusing. And there are some really fun one-off characters as well, but then we have Onko, who's just... ugh.
Look, incest jokes can be funny, I've seen it done before, but writing an entire character around the idea of them desperately wanting to bang their own sister is nothing but uncomfortable, annoying, and deeply deeply unfunny.
Just because the narrator acknowledges her as a deranged siscon doesn't make her not a siscon. The writers haven't given any sort of clever commentary or twist on this trope. They're just doing it unironically while acting like they're doing it ironically, and it sucks so bad. She is the sole blight on this otherwise wonderful series. Cause yeah, this thing is such a blast whenever Anko isn't involved. I could list all the jokes that made me burst out laughing and we'd be here all day, but my favorites were definitely all the meta jokes.
ほら、世界的にも有名なあの小鹿にもあるやつ。
おい、それ一番触れちゃいけないところ。
There are so many amazing fourth wall breaks here, but my favorite joke in the whole show would have to be how the penultimate episode sets up the season finale to be a parody of the disappearance of Haruhi Suzumiya. And as funny as a direct parody of that film could have been, the fact that the next episode is just like,
don't worry about it, dude, we're doing something else. Stinger wasn't even real.
Man, that got me. So yeah, banger absurdist comedy. I enjoyed pretty much everything about it, except for Anko. Did not care for Anko.
The vast majority of this section was written before I saw Season 7, so just keep that in mind. I only rewrote it slightly after watching 7.
The Dragon Prince has gone through some very interesting ups and downs across its run. Season 1 was rough around the edges, but still a very solid foundation. Season 2 was a noticeable improvement on all fronts. And Season 3 started off a little weird, but eventually hit some episodes that are still the show's strongest to date. Hiatus happens, and then Season 4 arrives in a pretty weak state. Not quite actively bad, but still extremely messy. And Season 5 was definitely more enjoyable to watch through experientially, but it had most of the same problems as Season 4 when you really stop to think about it. Fortunately though, Season 6 feels like the show has finally hit its stride again. The plot lines are all well paced and their screen time well divided. There's significantly less god-awful comedy and far more dramatic moments that hit hard. Important plot and character beats feel like they're given the space they deserve, and the setup for Season 7 is incredibly enticing. My favorite part of this season was definitely all the stuff with Viren and Soren. The Viren redemption arc is finally complete and it's great, but it's also really striking to see the show's primary comedic relief be so consistently angry and anguished throughout this season. The insights we get into their family's history are incredibly engaging, and the fact that Soren didn't really forgive his father before he sacrificed his life for Katalis is
more emotional complexity than I was expecting from this show, honestly.
Even more striking is Claudia's insanity arc. The absolute state of her at the beginning of this season is nothing short of harrowing, and it's frustrating in a good way to see her continue to help Erebos. Also, the arc of the return of Erebos in this show is starting to remind me a lot of Bill Cipher. Their motivations are totally different, obviously, but the two of them kind of give me similar vibes sometimes, I don't know. The destruction of Katalis was also a pretty insane twist, as was the death of Sol Regem, just a crazy season finale all around here. My biggest issue with the show would be that the romances just aren't working for me. I still feel like we were never really given a good reason to care about the Janai Amaya dynamic. Claudia and Terry are cute together, but his motivations still make zero sense to me. And the awkwardness caused by the time skip has turned this previously wonderful ship into one that I can't call anything more than okay. Other than that one consistent wrinkle, however, this is the best season we've gotten in a while. It doesn't quite reach the heights of Season 3, but it's at the very least on par with like Season 2.
A simple fading, where have you gone?
Star Wars The Bad Batch Season 3 was a pretty great end to the series. While I don't quite think it reaches the highs of Season 2, it's easily the most consistent season of the series and never wastes time in the way those first two seasons were often guilty of doing. Every episode this season always felt like it was bringing the story forward at a satisfying pace. Crosshair finding proper redemption through his connection to Omega was beautifully done. Tech's death last season feels properly mourned by all the characters. Asaja's inclusion was cool, even if it is canonically bizarre. And Hemlock is honestly one of my new favorite Star Wars villains. He has a very unique demeanor compared to most other Imperials, his death was viscerally satisfying, and I really like all the implied lore in his science.
To be clear, I do kind of hate that the chronologically earlier Star Wars stories are now being made to explain the absolute bullshit that is Palpatine's survival in Rise of Skywalker. But if that's something we have to do, I do like how this series has gone about it.
The detail they add to the world of Star Wars here feels rich, in spite of it being there explicitly to support one of the dumbest pieces of the entire franchise. Yet again, we have a dope animated series making up for the weaknesses of a live-action film trilogy.
Again, it's like poetry, so if they rhyme,
But anyways, I liked how this wrapped things up. Not quite as good as the Rebels finale and leagues below the Clone Wars finale, but it's still plenty satisfying. The time skip was really cute. I eagerly await to see what the next Star Wars animated series has to offer.
So I know everyone said that you don't need to have seen the original series in order to get into this one, but I didn't listen.
I rapidly binged the entire 90s X-Men series last year before watching 97. I've seen all 5 seasons, and my thoughts are decidedly mixed. There's a strong core there, the characters all feel very distinct, and the X-Men will always be compelling as an allegory for the marginalized, but the execution of the show frequently felt like it wasn't doing its concepts justice. It absolutely had its excellent moments and well-executed plotlines, but it was also quite the slog a lot of the time, which makes me very pleased to say that for the most part, X-Men 97 feels like all the core concepts of that original series finally done full justice. It improves the show on almost every front. The story feels way more focused, the dialogue is far sharper, the events of the series are actually allowed to be truly intense and go to far darker places, and the difference in animation quality is night and day. This show contains what are easily some of the most visually stunning animated sequences of 2024. Film or television, Western or anime.
To get my one big complaint out of the way first, though, they kinda suck at writing romances.
There were like 4 ships here that they clearly wanted me to care about, but it just didn't at all because they did not put in the proper narrative legwork. Storm has definitely had worse romances, but I still can't call her dynamic with Forge anything remotely compelling. I'm not super bothered by Xavier and Lalandra because that's a carryover from the original series, but it's still not very interesting. Jubilee and this new kid felt completely obligatory, and I feel like they were trying to set up something with Beast and this news reporter, but that low-key pissed me off because one of the very best episodes of the original series is this one where Beast has a really sweet dynamic with this blind girl and she's just never brought up again. Some of the romances that actually work here are the other carryovers. The Jean-Scott dynamic was always strong in the original series and it's no different here. All the melodrama with Jean's clone and Cable being their son was very well done, even if throwing Logan into the mix again was really stupid. Also, the love triangle with Rogue here works way better than it has any right to. The will they won't they between her and Gambit was always fun in the original series, so the choice here to really delve into what their relationship actually is was a welcome emphasis.
Also, even though it doesn't fit with the original series even remotely, and the age gap is definitely a little Rogue and Magnus were a shockingly compelling pairing here.
Despite it making even less conceptual sense than any of those other ones I just shit on, it's the only one of the show's new romances that I actually found myself caring about a lot. Their past together is just so damn tantalizing to learn about. Getting firmly into positives now, I love everything they did with Magnus here. Him sincerely trying to be better, the world proving his pessimism absolutely right, and then only being stopped from going too far by his most important person. It's an incredible arc. He was already the best part of any episode he appeared in throughout the original series, but they've beautifully amplified everything about him this season. He serves as the primary mouthpiece for all of the expected X-Men social commentary, and I've never seen an installment in this franchise where said commentary has felt so powerful. Mutants have always been an allegory for any number of societally disadvantaged groups, racial minorities, the queer community, disabled people, and while the series doesn't specifically talk about those things, you can absolutely still feel its unabashed embrace of everyone who has ever been othered because of things about themselves they can't control. The word wasn't absent from the original series, but there's just something about seeing Magnus here point blank call someone a bigot that's so insanely satisfying. Some other things I liked. Rogue's corruption arc was kinda shocking but super well handled. Xavier's internal conflict back on Shi'ar was very compelling even if his romance isn't. Our good Christian boy Nightcrawler is always a delight to have around, and I like that they seem to be maybe leaning into the idea of Morph being non-binary. He feels like a much more distinct character here than he ever did before, and it's cute how he kinda seems to be in love with Logan. Bastion as a villain for the season was just okay in my opinion. He has a cool backstory, very charming demeanor, and such a staggeringly terrifying plan, but I just don't like that his motivations essentially boil down to,
my life was hard, so now I hate everyone ever and I want to kill people. That's just boring.
The show feels a bit overstuffed and chaotic at times, but when it hits, and the part that hit most powerfully was undoubtedly episode 5.
Genuinely the hardest I cried at any piece of media in 2024. I was just stunned.
Gambit's death was shocking and badass and perfectly executed, and Rogue's reaction absolutely shatters your heart.
I can't feel you.
Oh my word. But honestly, the primary thing which emotionally devastated me here was the sheer horror of the Genoshan genocide right beforehand. I know there's a world of difference between these two scenes, but a fictional act of violence hasn't made me this fiercely angry and horrified by the sheer injustice of it all since Arnheid's death in Vinland Saga. In terms of singular episodes of television, Remember It has gotta be the best of 2024. But in the episode right before that, they bafflingly decided to bring back this insufferable shit-stained bastard from the original series whom I hate with all my soul, so yeah. X-Men 97 is sort of a mixed bag. There's certainly some fine-tuning that needs to be done heading into season 2/7, but the majority of this show still works incredibly well and is undoubtedly the best this story has ever been, at least of the variations I've personally seen.
My life was hard, so now I hate everyone ever and want to kill people. That's just boring. What's on? What's up? What's up, girl? Hi. What, paw? Paw?
From Me to You has been on my watch list for a while, but it was actually the release of this third season that convinced me to check it out right away. Not only is the drop of a new season 13 years after the previous very, very uncommon, the fact that it was being released in the format of 5-hour-plus long episodes greatly intrigued me.
I quite liked season 1, it nailed slow burn pacing, all the characters were likable, and the conflicts were just the right amount of melodramatic. But season 2 kind of gets worse the more I think about it.
It still has the same overall charm as season 1, but many of the characters felt somewhat regressed, the conflicts were ridiculously contrived, and it was permeated by this general feeling of...
Get on with it already?
They thankfully did get on with it though, which served as perfect setup for season 3 to come along 13 years later and be some of the most peak fiction ever made in the realm of cheesy anime romance. I suppose the best way to break things down here would be to go through it ship by ship. Starting with our main two, there's yet another frustrating period of misunderstanding between them across the 3rd and 4th episodes.
Which I will remind you is 2 whole hours of story this season.
But they do eventually justify it. The 5th and final episode is really good at making you realize just how similar these two are. In spite of one being an extreme introvert and the other being a very socially confident extrovert, they share pretty much the exact same character flaws. A decided lack of self-esteem and god-awful communication skills, which both put quite the strain on their relationship. But as soon as they finally talk through these issues, their dynamic becomes stronger than ever. For what feels like the first time over the course of their entire relationship, they can actually see each other without immediately feeling nervous. They're finally completely comfortable with each other, and that is so damn gratifying to see. Also, that first kiss of theirs caught me completely off guard. They really did a good job at making that moment unforeseeable.
I stopped breathing for like a good 8 seconds when that happened.
As good as the main pairing is though, they've honestly become the least interesting of the anime's 3 core romances, cause the other 2 are so emotionally exciting here. This season marks the first time we've really dug into the psyche of Ayane, and damn do I feel bad for this poor girl. It's here where it's really brought into focus the fact that she's kind of a people pleaser in a more subtle way, and all because she deals with some repressed self-esteem issues that are honestly far worse and more deep-seated than anything these jokers have to deal with. She laments the fact that, despite having been in several relationships, she feels as though she's never truly fallen in love, and she's corrupted that understandable struggle into seeing herself as unlovable. But then Kento comes crashing into her orbit. I was decidedly mixed on this guy when he was first brought in for season 2, but he does make a point to properly apologize for his wrongdoings and almost creating a love triangle in that season. Now he's just here to strong-arm Ayane into loving herself, and it's pretty great. Their relationship does feel a tad rushed to me, but the scene where they actually get together hits. His dramatic plea to her, essentially saying, please allow yourself the chance to actually fall in love
with me,
is great. And her shaky little is such a heartbreakingly brilliant moment of voice acting. Even by the end of the season, you can tell she's still having a hard time fully trusting her love for him, but she's definitely getting there. It's obvious that she's actually finally falling in love with someone, and that makes me so happy. Also, Kento definitely ain't bullshitting when he says he'll be good to her. He did sucker punch her most recent shitty ex, so I'd say he's pretty solid. And then we come to Ryu and Chizuru, a dynamic which brought to this season a level of emotional depth that I really did not think this anime was capable of.
That like half-hour flashback sequence in episode 3 is hands down the best thing the show has ever given us.
As it was playing out with all these adorably wholesome childhood moments between the two, it completely slipped my mind that Ryu's mom had been established as dead in the show's present. I swear to you that it was genuinely within seconds of me remembering that fact where they cut to her death in this extended flashback. So because I'm a forgetful dumbass, I wasn't just witnessing all this sickeningly sweet shit lying in wait for the inevitable sad part to hit. Just like the characters, it totally blindsided me, and it was the aftermath of this tragedy which truly cemented this relationship as being my favorite part of the entire series. Seeing the constantly blank-faced Ryu finally break down crying seemingly several weeks after the death destroyed me. I know childhood friends falling in love is an extremely well-worn trope, but these two are seriously next level. You really do get the sense that even if neither of them ever developed a crush, they are ride or die bonded for life. So seeing Chizuru finally starting to reciprocate Ryu's crush near the end of the season was so extremely enticing. So yeah, this was the show's best season by far. The hour-long episodes are incredibly immersive, the ships are all so well developed, and I know I kinda neglected to mention them given my focus on the romances, but these three have gotta be my favorite anime girl group since A Place Further in the Universe. I love what they have.
I want what they have, honestly.
While I am worried that another season would push our main couple into yet another contrived conflict, I am also kind of dying for another season in order to see where these other two ships go, because they've really only just begun. If this is the end though, they did the main ship so right that I'll ultimately be leaving satisfied. Also, does anyone else find it kind of funny that Kurumi is just completely irrelevant now? She had like one scene this season, rip bozo.
With me? With me? With me? Okay, that's enough.
Then you must have your revenge, my brother.
Yes. We shall start with revenge.
While I still don't think anything in this show is ever going to top the sheer majesty of its very first episode, as an overall season of television, Oshinoko Season 2 was a huge improvement over the first in my eyes. Season 1 was really good, but it often felt a tad meandery in between its handful of stunning highs. Season 2, however, feels much more focused and consistently high quality to me. The amazing moments weren't surprising, they felt much more naturally led into with much better season-wide pacing. The story moves to some pretty interesting new places this time around, with the most important one very much being the stage show that everyone in the core cast,
minus Ruby,
is involved in. For one, I really enjoyed this new character Goa that the arc introduces. I like how her personality constantly shifts between hyper-introverted and abrasively strong-willed, and her learning to accept the fact that significant change is usually a must when it comes to adapting stories into different mediums was really well done. The stage show itself leads to what is easily some of the coolest animation in the series so far, but my favorite element of the arc was definitely all the drama between Akane and Arima. They have such a fascinating dynamic. How they can't stand each other and yet also find each other incredibly aspirational. How they both desire to achieve things that the other long since has while also constantly being at each other's throats because of the love triangle.
Which, by the way, is probably the best love triangle I've ever come across.
It gives the scenes between these three so much excellent comedy and emotional tension. The triangle miraculously never feels annoying because I'd honestly be down for it to go either way. I like all three of these characters a lot. Right now I think I'm leaning Akane because she got more individual focus this season and also because Aqua is actually reciprocating for the first time, but I still find myself doubtful this will actually last. I love how it's become increasingly obvious that she's actually the most intelligent character in the show, and I also really appreciate how this series maturely talks about sex without feeling the need to gratuitously depict it.
Guess that's just the Aka Akasaka difference.
Finally talking about our protagonist though, Aqua goes through some very interesting changes here. It's pretty wild how he chooses to channel his acting ability through what are essentially 3 of the 4 steps to the dark side of the Force, only for the presence of such intense angst to become immediately irrelevant once his target appears long dead and his revenge impossible. I wasn't at all surprised when they quickly revealed that the killer is still out there, but I'm still really surprised that they so suddenly brought Aqua to this state of calm and actually left him there. I'm certain he'll resume the hunt once he realizes what Akane already has, but I'm still pretty hyped to see some more
positive mental attitude
from Aqua in Season 3. I'm looking forward to his much needed healing process, especially because we now have someone else to watch fall into a spiral of anger, hate, and suffering. I found it quite strange how the second most important character in the anime got almost nothing to do this season, but that was totally made up for by the finale, which not only radically alters Ruby, but makes it abundantly clear that she is going to be more or less the focus next season.
I love me a good corruption arc, so I cannot wait to see this typically pure-hearted ball of sunshine character thinking about murderous revenge all next season. Should be fun. Bungie? Bugni? Okay.
Your Chinese food is coming.
Other than one anime coming up a few entries from now, Gentry Chow vs. the Underworld was easily the biggest surprise of the year for me.
I thought the trailers looked rad, but the first 4 or so episodes weren't really grabbing me. They still served as some pretty solid setup, but the pacing felt really odd to me, and certain actions from the characters consistently weren't leading to the narrative consequences that I thought they warranted. It all just felt slightly off. The show really starts to lock in at around episode 5 though, and it only kept getting better and better and better, and by the time I got to the end, I had fallen fully in love with this series. The escalation behind Flora's secrets was consistently gripping, the love triangle was surprisingly decent. I love how much they push PG to its absolute limits with some proper horrific shit, and the climax it all builds to was kind of unreal, but I'm getting ahead of myself. First of all, one of the coolest things about this series is the sense of contrast inherent to its setting. The titular underworld and all the mystic magic of the show is clearly drawing primarily upon Chinese folklore, and it leads to so many awesome visuals and fascinating narrative concepts, but the show doesn't take place in China.
It takes place in Texas, and that is so fun.
It leads to stuff like this one lady who's throwing blades that can bring things to life, including giant 50-foot wooden cowboys. DU and the other realms are fleshed out just enough for the world of the show to feel truly rich and boundless, but it's never too much information to the point where things become confusing. Secondly, I really loved Gentry as a protagonist. Her arc of conjuring the will to determine what her own story will be when so much of her life exists against her will was consistently very engaging, and I like how she frequently imparts that lesson upon others, even if unintentionally. Her personality was always fun to watch, her sibling-ish dynamic with Ed was pretty cute, very Luz and King-coded, and as I said before, the love triangle she finds herself in is actually pretty good. Up to a certain point. I guess that's as good a segue as any to talk about Kit. I love his setup here because for the first few episodes, he's used as the most blatantly tropey, cute new guy I've ever seen, but then we learn a few episodes later that all this corny shit was actually just a ploy to manipulate Gentry and not just the writers being painfully unoriginal or something.
Quite the opposite, in fact. This was a very welcome subversion.
Seeing him be genuinely charmed by Gentry and choosing to aid her instead of trapping her for Cheng was all very well executed, as was him becoming creepily possessive later on and accidentally kicking off the big climax in his desperation.
It's all great stuff with him up until that point, but then his so-called redemptive sacrifice was just okay.
The scene itself was still decently effective in a vacuum, and he feels very adequately mourned in the remaining episodes, but killing off a character as a way of supposedly redeeming them almost always feels really cheap to me. I would have much preferred to see him naturally come to the realization that he was being shitty to Gentry instead of him just sacrificing his life for her and hand-waving away how much of a creep he was being right before this. And then there's our third vertice, Michael. I liked the mystery surrounding his seemingly genetic premonition powers, and I'm always a sucker for the childhood lovers. No, what? I liked the mystery surrounding his seemingly genetic premonition powers, and I'm always a sucker for the childhood friends to lovers trope, but the way they actually hook them up in the finale is just so actively awful.
Their will they won't they throughout the majority of the season was genuinely well done, but in this scene where they actually get together, Michael's just being a guilt-tripping, whiny piece of shit, and it works on her? What?
Everything he was saying in this scene beforehand just screamed desperate insecurity, so this being the scene where they finally kiss just fell utterly flat. I'm not saying their romance can't become compelling from here on out, but what a weird scene to kick things off with. My favorite character by the time the show was over would have to be Flora. The moral ambiguity that shrouds her past is so consistently interesting, and they really do a good job at making her feel genuinely untrustworthy for a while there. There's a stretch of episodes here where it really does feel like she just might be the bad guy, but her sincere remorse once all is revealed still worked very authentically as a proper redemption for her. Even though it's understandable why Mooney never quite forgives her, I appreciate that she fully redeems herself in the eyes of Gentry through emotionally charged conversations. Well before her actual sacrifice to save her. It was a perfect ending for her character and a far more well-executed redemption than Kit's. I also just love all her random house ghosts. They were super funny side characters. I mentioned previously that I thought earlier parts of the narrative weren't really having the kinds of consequences I felt they should, and I became worried that this may become a prevailing issue that would lead to a lack of weight in the story.
Oh my word, did I eat my words by the end of this season.
Gentry purges her powers and thus can't actually talk to Flora anymore, which leads to this truly palpable sense of loneliness in episode 9. And like I said before, Kit dies in episode 10 and stays dead. But if we really want to talk about consequences in this show, the piece of the story that particularly bothered me early on was how stressed Gentry was about people discovering her powers, and then they're revealed in episode 3 and just nothing really changes. I guess not everyone at the school believes she's the demon girl of Riverfork and that jackass principal doesn't have as much influence as he boasts.
But little did I know, they were just saving those consequences for later.
After a super emotionally taxing couple of days, here we have the currently powerless Gentry helping out with her school's cheerleading team as a way of connecting with her community more. The editing is tight, the colors and lighting are super brooding, the storyboarding is striking, and not knowing she's given up her powers by this point, the aforementioned jackass principal decides that now is the best time to expose Gentry's powers in front of everyone, and it leads to this.
Here it comes! When she gets upset, her powers activate. Watch! You'll see. They just take a second to...
Shit, man. Consequences.
This is the most emotionally devastating and visceral moment of humiliation I've ever seen in anything. Nevermore have I just desperately wanted to give a fictional character a hug. Poor girl.
Fuck this guy.
A few more assorted thoughts before wrapping things up here. Mr. Chang makes for a very engaging core threat throughout the season. His backstory was very interesting, and the eventual reconciliation with his...
Is the Lego here or at Dad's?
Which Lego?
Just the Lego.
It's in the garage.
Okay, so there's this Lego set that I opened a while ago, forgot about it, and I was like, oh, I should do that right now. It's a car. The main chassis piece, because it doesn't come in the bag, it fell out somewhere along the way, and I can't find it, so I need to find a chassis piece to...
What's chassis again? Like, what do you mean?
Like, do you know how on the smaller car Lego sets there's, like, the big, like, so-called, like, big piece in the center that you build it all around?
Yeah?
That.
Okay, well, it's upstairs in the garage.
Okay.
His backstory was interesting, and the eventual reconciliation with his daughter was very emotionally satisfying. Seeing Gentry regain her powers and deploying them to their fullest potential was so insanely badass. The final 3 episodes definitely feel a tad rushed, but they're still good. Mooney makes for a very interesting late-game character. Flora's sacrifice was great, as previously mentioned, and these two getting together sucked ass, as previously mentioned, but Venom Gentry was just so damn cool that I don't even care.
Overall, I loved Gentry Chow versus the Underworld.
It is far from perfect. The pacing is often uneven and some of the character writing definitely needs work, but the core cast were generally super engaging to watch. The animation was consistently stunning.
Like, significantly better than the only other Western animated show I have ranked above it for writing reasons.
The world of the series was super fascinating, and regardless of any issues I may have, I was so emotionally invested by the end. I cried more than once.
This show rocks, and I cannot wait for Netflix to cancel it after 1 season. Haha, kill me.
Jace. JB or JB not.
It's a testament to how insanely good Arcane is that this second season here, which still managed to crack my top 5, was honestly kinda disappointing.
Only in the sense that I was expecting borderline perfection and an easy shoo-in for the top spot, when what we got in reality actually had a decent number of flaws. It's still fantastic television, but unlike season 1, it's not literally flawless in almost every way. The season's first 4 episodes are pretty nearly there though. Everything up to and including the prison break at Stillwater is just as consistently peak fiction as the season before it. But from episode 5 onward, cracks definitely start to show. Never to the point of breaking, but the cracks are there, and I think the best way to break down all these pros and cons would be to go through it character by character. The most consistently excellent of our mains this season was undoubtedly Jinx. Her arc specifically was more or less perfect in my eyes. The different phases of her suicidal ideation were all emotionally compelling. Her reluctance to actually exist as a symbol of Zonite rebellion made for a good internal conflict, and her relationship with Isha was a great example of doing a lot with a little. They are so incredibly cute and heartwarming together, and while her death didn't make me cry, I still did not see it coming personally. Her sacrifice serves as pretty easily the most emotionally impactful moment of the entire season, and I do like where the show leaves Jinx in the end. Someone who is still extremely existentially depressed, but who will persist in order to protect what's important to her. Someone who will even die for the purposes of protecting her loved ones.
Although we all know she definitely ain't dead, come on.
No complaints with Jinx. Best character in the season, for for sure. Also, even though he ultimately didn't get a ton of screen time, another one of the season's strongest characters was Echo. His dynamic with Heimerdinger was consistently charming, and seeing him bounce off Jace a little bit was pretty cool as well, but I mostly appreciate Echo on account of that shockingly incredible alt-universe episode, a direction that none of us expected the show to take, and one that definitely further messes with the season's odd pacing, but was still so cool to witness. The bittersweetness of how harmonious everything is in spite of Vi's death really hits home. Seeing an emotionally stable and content version of Powder fills me with so many emotions, and that dance between her and Echo with that stunning Stromae song in the background is impactful in a way I barely even understand.
I can't articulate why, but out of every scene in this season, this is the one I have not been able to get out of my head.
It's so deeply enthralling, and it makes that final shot of Echo back in our main universe hurt all the more. Also, let it not be forgotten, while Jason Vector may have been the ones to end the conflict metaphysically, Echo is still the one who dealt the final blow. MVP of the season, for sure.
Also, this was me on Reddit 3 years ago. I actually kind of called it.
Speaking of Jace and Victor though, their stories this season were really good as well. The whole time travel angle with Alt-Universe Victor was definitely a lot more convoluted than it probably needed to be, but their arcs absolutely still worked emotionally. Victor becomes Hextech Jesus, the Hex Core corrupts his ideals to the point where he's barely even himself anymore, and then Jace, who's been through total hell, needs to be the one to convey to him what Alt Victor said about the meaninglessness of perfection.
There is no prize to perfection, only an end to pursuit.
That's easily the best line of the season, and then Jace makes up for his failures in their bromance by truly being there for Victor, destroying the anomaly together with him. Those final moments between the two were so incredibly beautiful. Mel was also decent this season. Her magical self-discovery was definitely rushed, but it's still super cool to watch, and it feeds very well into that Be the Wolf arc with her mother, who was an excellent main villain by the way. While nowhere near as compelling a villain as Silco, who is still the show's best character in spite of being dead, Mbessa's sheer badassery in combination with her judgment becoming increasingly clouded by ambition make her such an interesting character to watch.
She is the definition of gaslight, gatekeep, girl boss in all of the positive and negative ways which such a phrase entails.
To get into my main criticisms though, they really dropped the ball with Violet and Caitlyn in my opinion, both in terms of their individual arcs and their relationship. Going over their romance first, this was a problem I had even back in season 1. I absolutely shipped Violin in concept. The idea of these archetypes forging a connection sounds great on paper, but I've always felt like the show was way too eager to actually give it to us. What they have just never felt earned to me. They're hitting these relationship beats way too quickly. I didn't feel much during their first kiss, and all I felt during their sex scene was just confusion.
Like, I understand the desire to include this scene, and the memes have been great, but they could not have put this at a worse point in the story if they tried.
The previous scene we had with Vi was in this very same room having an ominous conversation where her sister strongly implies,
I'm gonna go kill myself.
And then she's just doing it with Caitlyn.
Have you no sense of urgency, Violet?
Why the hell did they put this scene right here, right now? Even Twilight of the Gods, as gratuitously unnecessary as all of its sex was, had the sense to place those scenes at relatively reasonable moments in the plot, but this is just absurd. As for them individually, Caitlyn slowly corroding her own ideals and becoming a dictator throughout Act 1 was so perfectly set up, but then Act 2 pretty much immediately cuts to the part where she already regrets her actions, instead of letting us actually get a sense of all the systemic suffering wrought by those actions. Her arc makes sense, but it's just not enough. We saw the beginning and end of it, but very, very little of the in-between, which was really quite disappointing. She also drops her hate for Jinx a bit too easily, I think. She says she's exhausted from her own anger, which is a sentiment I love, how very Eru Chitanda of you, but it's still not very narratively satisfying.
And then there's Vi, who, like, what even was her arc this season?
Maybe I'm just dense, but I have no idea what they were trying to say with her journey here. Sure, there were small, compelling moments, like that scene in the cave where she realizes that Jinx is a better sister to Isha than she ever was to Powder, and she seems to have a consistent worry of the people around her changing, but again, it's not enough. They could have dug so much more into her by, say, expanding on her time pit fighting or developing her dynamic with the oh-so-tragically wasted Loris, but instead, whatever she has resembling an arc all kinda hinges on on Resurrected Wolf Vander.
There is nothing I'm more conflicted on this season than Resurrected Vander.
On one hand, his presence leads to so many incredible scenes. The sheer horror of his arrival at Stillwater, the stunning watercolor animation as he regains his true self, that lovely flashback with Silco and Felicia. I loved all of that, but at the same time, his partial return here feels like a really cheap way to make amends between the sisters. It still works just enough, but it's so disappointingly easy as well. Way less emotionally complex than pretty much any other way you could have reforged the bond between Violet and Powder. Moving away from the characters now, I want to talk about a common criticism I've seen that I actually disagree with. People feeling as though the class struggle side of the plot was ruined this season. It's absolutely true that the stark inequality between Zahn and Piltover took a major backseat here in flavor. It's absolutely true that the stark inequality between Zahn and Piltover took a major backseat here in flavor. It's absolutely true that the stark inequality between Zahn and Piltover took a major backseat here in favor of exploring the actual arcane of it all, but I don't think the political side of the story in Season 2 at all betrays what was set up in Season 1. Them dispatching all the Chem Barons was one example of this season using efficient storytelling in a way that didn't feel rushed. The spirit of rebellion sparked by all of Jinx's colorful terrorism felt very apt, and I truly don't find it unbelievable that Zahn would help Piltover in the conflict against Noxus, because Jace did emphasize that this was a battle for humanity itself. In this conflict, their class disputes don't matter, only saving the world does. Also, it's incredibly clear that their unity in this fight wasn't the solution to their problems, merely a single step in the right direction, a beginning. Everyone on the council is visibly super tense when Sevika sits down with them at the end. There's evidently still a long way to go before these two nations are truly at peace. Also, go off, Queen.
Sevika is my underrated fave, and I love seeing her become the de facto leader of Zahn. Boy, does she deserve it. As for the most unsurprisingly excellent part of the season, the animation and music both absolutely slayed.
Season 2 proves once and for all that Arcane truly is Spider-Verse's small screen equal. The pencil visuals at the funeral in episode 1, the aforementioned watercolor as Vander remembers his life, those Scott Pilgrim-ass visuals during Sevika's fight against Smeech, everything about Victor's astral plane, the sketchy crayon-esque visuals that play throughout Isha's sacrifice. Even when the visuals aren't doing anything particularly experimental, they're still so consistently stunning to look at.
And dude, so many amazing songs.
To Ashes and Blood, Isha's song, that aforementioned Stromae song, Heimerdinger's strangely affecting folk song. They even got 21 Pilots on this shit, and it was beautiful. I know some people took issue with the show's music video approach for any of these sequences, but I never got tired of them. They worked for me each and every time.
So that's Season 2 of Arcane League of Legends.
It's undoubtedly flawed and simply does not live up to how insanely airtight that first season was, but it's still pretty amazing when all is said and done. It's far too ambitious for its own good and absolutely needed more episodes to fully explore everything it wanted to, but it still succeeds way more than it doesn't and stands tall as an absolute achievement in the realm of animation. I'm incredibly excited to see what other stories they'll tell through the Runeterra universe in the years to come.
Delicious in Dungeon was so much better than I ever expected it to be.
I'd seen the hype for it when it was airing and thought that the concept of a fantasy cooking show sounded kinda cute, but I wasn't compelled to actually give it a shot until a cousin of mine strongly recommended it, and yeah, this was such a banger. There is so much more going on here than just fantasy cooking, which is kind of all I was expecting it to be going in. The whole eating the horrors beyond my comprehension angle of the series is super fun and lends the universe such a deeply rich sense of world building. But the piece of this show which stuck with me most by the end was undoubtedly its characters.
They've absolutely become one of my new favorite core groups in anime.
Our main group here is so incredibly well fleshed out and I love them all so much. I guess Chilchuck would kinda be my least favorite by default, but that's really only because of how much I adore these other three and really can't pick a favorite between them. Laios is some of the best accidental autism representation in the history of storytelling. Senshi is just so inherently lovable and admirable while also having a surprisingly dark backstory, and there's just so much going on with Marcille. Her sheer nervous energy, her rich wisdom in some areas and incredible naivety in others, her love for and history with Fallon contrasted with the guilt she now feels regarding Fallon's feathery state of affairs.
She just really needs a hug, honestly.
Fallon herself also works incredibly well as a driving force for the narrative. The brief glimpses we get of the real her are so immediately endearing, and also low-key autistic, that you are right there with Laios and Marcille and so desperate desperately wanting to see her saved. Also, her chimera design once the show takes its dark turn is so properly freaky.
I mean freaky in the traditional sense, although I imagine some may mean it in the other sense.
Whoa, hey!
Come to think of it, this is also the first anime I've personally watched that has an honest-to-God cat girl in it. I mean, unless you count.
No, it was the school of life. I have raised 3 kids and 1 husband.
There's so much more I could talk about with this show, like its interesting approach to fantasy races, its engaging magic system, the plethora of interesting side characters, its animation that occasionally pops the hell off, but I don't think I need to make this video any longer than it's already going to be. Come for the food, stay for the characters, I highly recommend it, cannot wait for season 2.
If the show's called Invincible, then why can I see it?
Invincible Season 2 was such an incredible follow-up to the first. It does everything it sets out to do pretty much perfectly. I don't think it ever quite reaches the same stunning highs as Season 1, but I would argue that it runs at a more consistent level of quality, and there were still plenty of insane moments to be found here. Mark meeting his father again as he's in the throes of a redemption arc was extremely compelling. Mark's battle against Angstrom was absolutely harrowing, and I guess the massacre at the hands of the Lizard League was pretty shocking as well, but it's kinda undermined by the fact that most of them survived. I'm definitely glad Rex is still here so that he's now able to approach hero work as a much more well-rounded individual. He's surprisingly become one of my favorite characters, but I really don't think Duplicate and Shrinking Ray were important enough to give dramatic fake-out deaths. I wrote this before Season 3, by the way. I do like Ray now, but Duplicate's whatever.
That's like my only narrative problem with the season though. Everything else is amazing.
Nolan's rampage last season doesn't feel glossed over at all, and you can really feel the effects of that disaster all throughout this season. Mark's fear of becoming his father is very engaging, and it lands him in a really sad place by the end. And I actually thought the breakup with Amber was quite well handled, and I'm excited to finally reach what was clearly endgame all along. But my favorite part of the season has gotta be Debbie. Her anguish here was so gripping to the point where I found myself genuinely concerned that she might actually end her own life.
This is absolutely the kind of show that would go there. None of the side characters are safe.
Also, this show continues to have some of the best needle drops in the business. Radiohead, Blonde Shell, Michael Kiwanuka, whoever's in charge of this show's music has very similar taste to me. But yeah, an amazing second season. It still blows that a show with such incredible writing is stuck with animation that's just serviceable, but I'm not as bothered by that as many others seem to be.
Season 3 was also incredible, but that's a topic for next year's video.
Kill yourself.
Oh, the things I could say about Frieren Beyond Journey's End. There's just so much to love about this anime. It simply has everything you could possibly desire from a series of this nature.
You want cool fantasy world building?
Well, we got tons of detailed conversations about the magic system and so much implied history to think about.
Do you not really care about that stuff and are more interested in the pressing things?
We've got an excellent core story with rich characters and emotionally heavy moments that hit just as hard as all the wonderful comedy.
You want romance?
Boom, we've got it.
You want engaging character dynamics of a different nature?
Boom, we've got it.
You want a cast of enjoyable side characters alongside our mains?
Boom, we've got it.
You want chill slice of life stuff?
Boom, we've got it.
You want a good score?
Oh boy, do we got it.
You want insanely well animated action sequences? You want good voice acting?
Both the Japanese and English dubs go hard here. There is nothing not to love about this show. Its single most remarkable element for me, though, is honestly the way in which it's mastered slow pacing unlike any other series out there. While the narrative does have an end goal which drives the characters forward, that goal being the journey to Aureole, the goal weirdly doesn't even matter as much as the day-to-day happenings of the show. They somehow manage to make you care about the quote-unquote filler more than the quote-unquote A-plot, which is so incredibly fascinating from a writing perspective. While not quite as extremely lovable as our mains in Dungeon Meshi, this show's core cast is truly a delight as well. The absolute peak of the season for me was honestly that brief window where Sign was in the party. That quadfecta of characters was so extremely perfect, and it really is a shame that Sign was only temporary. This whole show so far is honestly just perfect. My only slight criticism is that the exam arc in the season's final third felt a little too drawn out, but it still gave us some of the show's most interesting characters and most insane moments, so I can't even complain too much. So yeah, incredible series. Cannot wait for season 2. Stupid ass Twilight of the Gods dwarf wishes he was on the same level as these absolute kings.
I have so many feelings about this season, so many feelings about this show in general.
Sound Euphonium means so much to me, but it also means a lot simply to see KyoAni back on their feet and thriving. This season probably would have come out 2 or 3 years ago if it weren't for the tragic arson fire of 2019, and while this ain't the first thing they've released since then, it is the release that's probably been the most important to me. It's absolutely wild to see that even in the wake of such an awful event and 8 years between seasons, KyoAni truly has not missed a beat here.
I also thought that the lack of Naoko Yamada, the greatest anime director working today, would noticeably weaken the season, but honestly, nah.
I mean, you can definitely sense that her unique touch isn't really here anymore, but if this season proves anything, it's that Naoko was far from the only mad genius working for Kyoto Animation. Learning that the members of the crowd in that final episode were all modeled after those lost in the fire, it's equal parts heartbreaking and heartwarming. One of the most beautiful things they possibly could have done in response to something so unbelievably dark.
In terms of sheer visual fidelity, this might just be the best thing they've ever put to TV.
Some of their movies are definitely still a bit more technically impressive, but if we're talking just TV, this shit might actually exceed Violet Evergarden. They've truly outdone themselves here, and I could not be happier for them. As for the actual content and execution of the narrative here, I think I probably still prefer the near perfection of Season 1, but I do consider Season 3 to be overall slightly stronger than Season 2. One of my favorite things about this show has always been how good it is at balancing its absolutely massive ensemble cast.
Every single even remotely important character here feels truly distinct and memorable, with so many fun little bits of characterization across the season.
The new kids in the base section all have their own little quirks and make for a very entertaining friend group of side characters. Midori and Motomu are shown to have developed a pretty deep bond by this point, and it's a relationship that really resonates in spite of its purposeful lack of definition. Seeing Hazuki slowly become more confident across the series has been great, and her sheer excitement at finally making the nationals team after all this time elated me. I love how Kanade enjoys messing with Motomu, but as soon as he matures and her prodding no longer works, her fixation seemingly becomes a crush. I like how Kanade and Ririka have become buddies in the background, and seeing Ririka help her underclassmen in shots that directly parallel Liz and the Bluebird made me feel... well, it made me feel very deeply. There's that micro-arc of Satsuki mentoring Suzume surpassing her in skill, which initially puts Satsuki on edge, but instead of that building into resentful jealousy, we see that their bond only becomes stronger after this. It's also cool how throughout all of Mayu's drama with Kumiko, we will get to that, Tsubume is present as a consistent friend and moral support for her.
And girl, don't even get me started on the returning graduates.
He said at the top of a paragraph about entirely just that. The Minami Quartet will always be my favorite group of characters in this series. The return of Yuko and Natsuki in episode 7 filled me with such vibrant joy, and I was also so grateful to see them continuously pop up throughout the rest of the season as well. They're girlfriends, and you cannot convince me otherwise. Also, seeing Mizure absolutely killing it at her university and sincerely enjoying herself was so emotionally affirming. It only further enhances the stunning masterpiece that is Liz and the Bluebird, but even more hype than any of those guys would have to be the brief but perfect singular scene we're gifted with the anime's forever MVP, Asuka. Her and Kumiko still play off each other wonderfully, the scene factors into Kumiko's arc this season so impactfully, and it's pretty wild that in a show so notorious for Yuri bait, these two are the only ones that actually kinda became canon. I definitely wasn't expecting them, but I suppose it does make sense in hindsight.
I could honestly go on, but do you see what I mean now by incredible ensemble cast?
Half those characters don't even particularly matter to the story this season, but they're all still given these wonderfully humanizing little moments, all without any detriment to the stories of our actual protagonists. Even the characters in the band who have absolutely zero dialogue are all given unique designs, names, and even personalities through the body language on some of them. More than genuinely any other anime I've ever seen, this series truly makes you feel like everyone here has a story to tell. You look at any individual one of these insignificant background characters, and it's just so easy to picture an entire complex journey for them that's just as rich as the journeys of our actual core characters. Speaking of those core characters though, it's about time we talked about Mayu and Kumiko. The new kid on the block with incredible skill and hard to read motivations, butting heads with my favorite protagonist in anime history.
This girl seriously has one of the most deeply engaging character arcs I've seen across all fiction.
The first 2 seasons showed her starting from a position of complacent listlessness in her life, but through all her newfound friendships, and rekindled in the case of Reina, Kumiko discovers her true sense of self and thus fosters an incredible amount of determination in the pursuit of music. And now, from that place of healthy self-assuredness, she must face her most difficult challenge yet: leadership. Being the best president for the club she can possibly be. I've noticed that certain elements of Season 3 were decently divisive within the fandom, one of the most significant sore spots being disappointment over the season's relative lack of musical performance sequences when compared to other parts of the franchise. And while I can definitely understand this disappointment on a surface level, I actually think this shift in focus is a decision perfectly in line with Kumiko's character arc. That feverish desire to improve which she gained in the first 2 seasons has not gone away, but her musical skills aren't the things in need of improvement here, it's her capabilities as a leader. Season 3 is less focused on the actual music because Kumiko is less focused on the actual music. She doesn't get the club through Kansai competition by improving her own musicianship or merely by encouraging others to do so. She does it through that incredible tearjerker of a speech which miraculously manages to put everyone's minds at ease and reinstill their confidence in themselves.
All throughout the season, it's very distinctly about Kumiko's relationship to the club members as their helpful president.
At first, it's a relationship seen through her quelling of smaller dramas like Suzume's concern over her sister's recognition, Sally's stress over the dissatisfaction brewing within the first years, as well as all of Motomu's angsty family drama. But then, throughout the whole second half of the season, Kumiko faces her final boss, so to speak, Kurue Mayu, a character who forces her to confront all the most selfish parts of herself and definitively choose the band's forward momentum as their leader over her own self-interests as a musician. And it's not an easy journey for her. It's not an easy journey for Mayu either. Her evident lack of self-esteem is really quite sad, but it's cool to see her continuously open up throughout the season, and after such an agonizing back and forth with Kumiko over the course of multiple episodes, as well as her unloading about where her insecurities actually come from, seeing this girl finally come to believe in Kitauji's meritocracy and smile with such deep sincerity at the end of episode 12 was such a cathartic moment. The show's reduced focus on musically driven scenes here is also the exact reason why the season's most controversial moment, Kumiko losing the Soli to Mayu, is so incredibly perfect for her arc. She lost out on her personal pinnacle of musical achievement because she instead put all that time and effort into becoming the leader Kitauji needed. The loss hurts, and it's supposed to hurt. It's supposed to feel wrong to some degree, but it's that very wrongness in concert with the fact that they do win in the end which makes this one of the most powerfully bittersweet stories I've seen in recent memory. There's still a part of me that sincerely wishes it didn't have to be this way, but there's a bigger part of me that knows this is so much more interesting and emotionally complex than if she just got to play the Soli.
It's such a brilliant way to conclude her character arc that I'm honestly shocked it was the other way around in the source material.
A truly inspired adaptational choice on KyoAni's part. The scene where Kumiko and Reina break down together over the situation had me breaking down right there with them, and that visual parallel back to their most pivotal scene of season 1 absolutely floored me.
This is how you do fucking fan service, the emotionally stimulating kind, not the weird kind.
But yeah, Kumiko is my favorite protagonist in anything ever. I love her so much it's not even funny.
And again, I mean that in the sense of a deep appreciation, not romantic attraction.
Are there any issues with the season? Yeah, I suppose so. I really wish that Reina wasn't such a static character, at least in some ways. She's still great here in all the ways that are relevant to her incredible relationship with Kumiko. I still love all their adorable, confusingly platonic moments together. Her hurtful words to Kumiko as the season's drama ramps up were frustrating but completely in character, and her heartfelt apology a few episodes later was so wholesome. Even though I'm glad she feels remorse over the stress she caused Kumiko, I kinda wanted her treatment towards the other club members to be more significantly challenged by the narrative. Her harshness absolutely is necessary for the band's success, but she never really comes to acknowledge the emotions of the club or the undue stress she causes them.
Also, her continued fixation on Taki is just as groan-worthy as it's always been.
It does still lead to a handful of decently funny moments, but it's just so completely vestigial to the narrative by this point. It has no reason to be here, it's just weird. Also, the epilogue is kind of a mixed bag for me. A mixed bag in that they ended Kumiko's story flawlessly. Her becoming a music teacher makes so much sense and is absolutely what I wanted to see, but she's like the only character who gets an actual ending.
To be clear, the climax of the season was truly incredible.
The long-awaited performance of Hitotse no Uta with all those flashbacks from across the series made me cry. The sheer euphoria of seeing them finally win as the score interpolates all those musical motifs from across the series also made me cry. And again, the epilogue did so right by our girl, and that's absolutely the most important part, but I really wish at least some of the other characters also got that treatment.
Kumiko mentions in one line that some of them found work and that's it. What a nothing burger.
Also, are they seriously implying that Reina has been in the US all these years? I do believe in the strength of their relationship, as is constantly reinforced throughout the season, but I kinda wanted to see that bond show its power one more time. Despite it bafflingly never becoming a romance, theirs was unquestionably the single most important relationship across the entire series, only potentially rivaled by the importance of Kumiko and Asuka's dynamic, so them being apart for seemingly half a decade just didn't really feel right. I desperately needed something like the Amphibia epilogue here, just one more little scene of emotional catharsis to truly convey that no amount of time or distance could ever break what they have.
Regardless of anything else though, I still absolutely adored Sound Euphonium Season 3.
Even after all this, I feel like there's so much more I could say. So much more that I'm not accurately expressing about how intricately wonderful this anime is, but I really need to wrap things up here. For me personally, this has always been the most motivational piece of fiction I've ever come across. Just like how Kumiko's plea of motivated me back when I first discovered this show, the line from this season
やらない理由を探す癖がつくと、いつか身動きが取れなくなるぞ。
inspired me to foster genuine change in my life around the time of Season 3's airing. I won't say what this change was, because that's personal, but it has lasted. This series still has so much power in my life, and I'm sure that further rewatches will only continue to motivate me as well. Easily my favorite new season of television from 2024.
Still feels kinda weird that it wasn't Arcane at this top spot, but Sound Euphonium is certainly no slouch.
As for what my favorite animated movies of 2024 were, I loved the three of these pretty much equally. All radically different films, I know, but they all really connected with me. If I had to pick a favorite though, I guess I'd go Look Back, simply because it's the most emotionally devastating of the three, and oh boy do I love crying at fiction.
I don't really have an outro for this video. I suppose y'all could let me know what some of your favorite animated things were last year in the comments.
Bye!